Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on how to write compelling case studies. My name's Carla Whitcomb and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for our case products here. So thank you for joining us. This webinar will last for around an hour and we will be making a recording available. So we've left some time at the end for Q&A, but please feel free if you think of anything as we're going along, please do write it in the question pane on the right-hand side of your screen and we'll get to that at the end. So as there's a lot of people joining us today, you will all be on mute, but this will be the best way of you to engage with us and ask questions is by using that question panel. Okay, so I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. So firstly, we've got Dr. Rebecca Morris, who is the Editor-in-Chief of the Case Journal, and she's also the past president of the Case Association and the North American Case Research Association. So she'll be talking to us about how you can go about writing compelling case studies. Her own cases have been included in more than 20 strategic management, international business and business ethics textbooks. And also cases that she has supervised have been twice awarded the NACRA Best Student Authored Case Award. Currently, she teaches strategic management and international business at Westfield State University in Westfield, Massachusetts. And then Claire Jackson will briefly talk about how you go about submitting a case. Claire's recently joined the Case Journal and the broader Emerald Case Collection as senior publisher, and she's your main contact for any queries regarding the submission and publication process. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Rebecca.
Well, I'm happy to be able to talk with you about something that has been an important part of my life for the past 20 years. I've been working in the case area for that long and really have enjoyed case writing, and I'm happy to share what I know about case writing with you today. So let's move on to our first slide. And could we go to the next one, please? I thought we should probably spend a few minutes talking about what makes a case study compelling, and we could look at this from two perspectives. First, the student perspective, and then we'll talk about what instructors look for when they're looking for case studies. So in this first slide, as we think about what students are looking for, my students and many students I've talked with oftentimes emphasize that they want cases that are easy to read. And what they mean by that is that they want short cases. Recent research study shows that only about 70% of students had not actually read any of the readings before coming to class. And in case discussions, if the students haven't read the case, it's a missed learning opportunity. There's no way to really generate good discussion when students are unfamiliar with the situation. So students want cases that are short. Secondly, they want cases that have simple language, and what they typically mean by that when you ask them is that they want cases that aren't laden with all sorts of jargon and technical terms that are difficult for them to understand. They like cases that are simple and direct and don't really have all of those complicated terminology that they have to learn and all sorts of acronyms and so forth. And then thirdly, students report, and I just verified this yesterday in a case discussion in class, whenever they hit financial statements, those tables of numbers really just don't do anything for them, and they basically just flip the page and skip the financials and don't really see any value for them in that. Now, of course, as instructors, we're going to probably challenge that, but that's what students report. They hold the financials, please. I don't need those. I'd rather read about it than have to pour through those tables of numbers. Students are also looking for cases that are interesting to them. Currency of cases is really important to them. They want cases that are less than 2 years old. Oftentimes they'll tell me that if a case is set further back than that, that they don't really know what was going on in the world at that time because they were in high school and not really paying attention. Also, students want to have cases focus on a company that they're familiar with. Either they buy the product or they have seen it in the news, or it's a Facebook or a Google or something that's really relevant to their experience. And they find really a lot of difficulty in studying cases that are in industries that they really don't know much about. Another issue is that they want cases that are exciting. You know, if I assign a case about a manufacturing facility, they'll talk about how boring this case is. They want cases that are interesting for them and exciting for them. And so 2 examples that I can give you, they really like to read about failure. They like to see where big companies have lost their way and they feel sort of smug that they as mere students could see what went wrong with the company. And then because they're millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Zs, they oftentimes like cases that have ethics and social justice issues. This is an important value for that demographic. And if they have cases that talk about companies either doing really good things in ethical issues or really bad things in ethical issues or social justice issues, those generate a great deal of discussion. And then the last thing from a student perspective that we should probably consider as we talk about cases is they want cases that are affordable. Students report that college education experiences, expenses are so high that they oftentimes can't afford to buy the textbooks and so forth. So cases that are cost effective for them are really important because they don't want to spend a great deal of money for additional materials for their classwork. So let's turn next to the instructor's perspective. So next slide. What are instructors looking for? And you will find, of course, that this is going to be very different than what students want. Instructors are looking for cases that fit with or illustrate particular course topics. When I teach, I have a list of topics that I think really are well supported by cases, and I look specifically for those. So for example, I know I'm going to need a global strategy case, and so I'll look for a case that will fit with that topic. And it's also beneficial sometimes if cases align with particular chapters in primary textbooks so that people know, okay, when I cover this important topic in my class, then I'm going to have a case that will match up with that chapter coverage. And then also, some instructors like to find cases that provide a different perspective on theory or concepts that they're teaching. So it's always nice when you say that there are certain theories that apply to all businesses to find that one case that perhaps illustrates that concept in a different way or shows a different application. The second bullet there refers to the learning value for students, and instructors are oftentimes looking for cases where the learning value is greater than the work that's required. They don't want cases that require a great deal of effort on the student's part for very little gain in terms of learning objectives. So we have to kind of look at that as we write cases and how we can increase the learning value without requiring students to jump through lots of hoops or do lots of homework in order to get very little out of the case. The third bullet, faculty members do choose cases that are interesting to them. They often like to have a case that they're familiar with so that they can teach it. So it could be that they know somebody that works at the company, they're a customer of the company, or they've had a good association with the company. And they often want to make sure that they have found cases that they're comfortable will generate discussion. So if the faculty member has some connection to the company that's the focus of the case, they're a little bit more comfortable in the classroom, and that generally allows them to facilitate the discussion and be more effective with the case. The next one talks about the availability of supporting materials, and a lot of instructors in colleges and universities around the world are less experienced with case teaching these days. And so they're oftentimes looking for teaching materials that will help them be more effective in the classroom with the case. If you're new to case teaching, it can sometimes be a pretty uncomfortable thing in that you're standing in front of the room hoping that the students will generate some good comments and discussion, but they oftentimes don't. And so you have to have ways to elicit that discussion from them. And so an instructor's manual can help with teaching tips and things like that to help kickstart the conversation. Instructors also want videos and other ancillary materials to be available. It's not unusual to have a little YouTube video clip that you might show to start the conversation. Ancillaries could include things like a quiz that you could give in class, or a role play that might be a useful way to generate some discussion. And the supporting materials like this can really help an instructor decide, yes, I want to choose this case because I'm going to feel good about teaching it, and I know I'm going to do well with it because I have all the support. And then the last thing that instructors probably look for as they're choosing cases is that they want cases that are easy to access and assign, so that students don't have to struggle, or there aren't problems with getting the case materials to the students themselves. And so if we look at all of these things, as we write cases, if we keep this in mind, we can generate cases that will be more interesting for students, more interesting for faculty, which then increases adoptions, and our work gets then used more frequently. So let's move on to the next piece. And this is just a little reminder of what we're talking about when we talk about a publishable case. It really has two components. And most people are familiar with the case piece of a case publication. And the case is the factual story about actions that have happened in the past that prompts the reader to make a discussion, a decision, or perform analysis or evaluation. And so one of the things I want to stress about that is at TCJ and many other case journals, we only publish factual stories. I know that some faculty members write so-called cases for their classroom use where the case is purely fictional, and we don't publish those because we find that the real world is a much better, much stronger learning opportunity than any kind of fictional stories. And basically what happens with fictional cases is students often find that out fairly early. They figure it out for themselves that this is not a real story. And once they figure that out, they don't go further with the case. They don't really learn anything from it because they basically stop reading it and shut it down. So real world stories, factual stories are the only thing that we publish at TCJ. And then to have a publishable case, you also have to have the instructor's manual. And in the instructor's manual, there are major sections like what audience you're targeting in terms of is it suitable for graduate students, undergraduate students, at the beginning of the course, at the end of the course, which courses would you be using this case in. We also provide learning objectives which enable the instructor to decide whether the case is a good fit for their classroom, and then discussion questions and complete answers to those discussion questions. So if I'm teaching a case in an industry that I'm unfamiliar with, I know what the correct answer or the better answer should be by reading the instructor's manual. And then we try to provide teaching strategies or teaching tips that help instructors teach these cases as effectively as the authors might teach them. So both of these things have to be present in order to have a publishable case. And we think that TCJ does a superior job on the instructor's manuals, and we'll talk about that in just a minute as well. So let's move on to our next slide. So now that we know what a case is, let's talk about why people write them. And I'll start at the 12 o'clock position here on this diagram. A lot of people that write cases write them to fill a pedagogical gap. They have a concept or a theory in their course, and they can't seem to find the right case to illustrate that concept or theory. And so sometimes they'll write a case to basically do something that they want to do that they can't find any other materials for. And that is an important addition to the literature then. The second reason, intellectual curiosity. Sometimes case writers choose to write about a particular topic just because they want to know more about it themselves. It's an industry that either intrigues them, or a firm that's interesting for some reason, or perhaps the firm has done something and they're trying to figure out, why did they do this? And so they might write the case to study it more in depth themselves. And that can be a pretty powerful way to generate cases. The third one, share best practice. We publish a lot of cases that are considered best practice cases where companies are doing exceedingly well, and we want to use that to illustrate best practice, and then to help the students understand what the company is doing that allows it to perform at such a high level. And then the bottom two, outreach to the industry and create links between academia and industry, are also important reasons why people write cases. There are also great benefits for institutions that support case writers, because a lot of universities and colleges are trying to have stronger links with industry. And because cases are oftentimes researched through primary data, where the case writer goes to the company and interviews the executives and tours the company and actually observes operations and so forth, it's a great way to increase the business knowledge of the instructor and also provide some interaction between the faculty and member and the companies. Companies also benefit by having cases written about them, because a lot of times just talking with the case writer and being interviewed and asked questions causes the company to reflect on some of their practices. And I have firsthand seen where it causes the company to think more strategically about what's going on in their own company as they think about how to answer some of the questions that are asked. And it can result in a good outcome for the company as well. But this bridging of academia and practice is an important thing, and case writing is a strong bridge to that. Next, we can talk about the whole pressure to publish. A lot of people write cases because their institution is requiring them to publish in academic works. And they see case writing as a more approachable way to publish research than traditional empirical research. And sometimes they find that case writing is perhaps a little bit more difficult than they thought. Because a lot of times they're focusing only on the case, and they say, well, I can be a good storyteller and I can write a case. But we have to remember that the instructor's manual is going to have to be written as well in order to publish. And that really is the scholarly contribution of the case publication. And it requires a lot of some of the same skills that empirical research does in terms of relating the situation to appropriate theoretical frameworks, explaining those frameworks clearly, and then providing good, solid analysis of the situation in the answers to the discussion questions. So while it can be a good outlet for publications for people that perhaps don't have sufficient training in empirical research, it isn't as easy sometimes as it looks, and will require people to also learn the art of case writing and how to write that instructor's manual so that it's a strong one and can be published. And then the last one on this diagram is impact. And this is what basically drew me to case writing, because I had published empirical work before, but I felt that it wasn't really as meaningful to me or to others as I had wanted it to be. And I turned to cases as wanting to have the work that I did matter, in the sense that people read it, people used it, and it impacted people's thinking and so forth. And case writing can be a very strong way to have that kind of impact. Cases that are published have long reaches. Now that we have global distribution, your work can be read by people all over the world. It can help students develop critical thinking skills that then they apply in their business setting. So a lot of people that write cases feel that the impact of cases is really important, and that they get a lot of gratification out of knowing that the work that they do is actually being read and used and is influencing future leaders. And so impact becomes an important reason to write cases. So hopefully I've encouraged you to write cases. Let's talk some more about TCJ. So if we go to the next slide, I can put my editor hat on for a minute. The Case Journal is the official journal of the Case Association, and the Case Association used to be called the New England Case Writers. So we're primarily located in the Northeast of the United States, although we've expanded far beyond that now and have contributors from all over. But the journal was established in 2004 as an online journal. I'm the 4th editor of the Case Journal. And in 2015, Emerald Publishing acquired the journal and has been our publisher since then. We're really grateful to Emerald because it does give us a much broader distribution and promotion than we ever had on our own. So it has been a good partnership that we're very grateful for. And currently we're publishing 6 issues online per year. And this next bit I need your help with. Our goal is 40 cases for 2018. And so I'm hoping that some of you that are listening in today will be energized by this and will think about writing cases and submitting them to TCJ, because I'm going to need a lot of submissions to get to 40 cases in 2018. In 2017, we had submissions from 20 different countries, and I think that this was probably a high point for us, and so we are generating a lot of interest from other countries. And this has been, I think, a good addition to the journal itself, because now we're publishing cases about companies in different countries and some of the issues that are involved there, and a much more diverse set of companies and locations that allow people to select cases that really fit well with their teaching. So let's move on to next. If you wonder what kinds of things the journal publishes, TCJ publishes traditional cases, and these would be much like you'd see at Harvard Business Review or other outlets. These traditional cases arrange, in all of the business disciplines. Again, they're all accompanied with instructors' manuals. We've also started publishing compact cases, and we're going to talk about the difference between traditional cases and compact cases in our next slide. So I'm going to reserve some of my comment for that next one. I'm particularly interested in seeing the case concept evolve. Cases have been used, it'll be 100 years of cases in 2020. They were first used at the Harvard Business School almost a little less than 100 years ago. And so it seems to me that they really haven't changed a whole lot since then. And so we're looking at new forms of cases that we could use. And so on the right side of the slide, I've listed a couple of those. We're interested in multimedia cases that might use video or audio or some combination thereof to illustrate some of the case points. Yale University is using raw cases, and they have been of interest of ours. Raw cases typically provide a lot of information to students, but it isn't filtered quite or summarized like a traditional case. And so students are basically acquiring information and interpreting and filtering that information themselves as they do the analysis. Comic book cases or graphic novel type cases would be of interest to us at TCJ. And then we're also seeing other institutions experimenting with cases with dedicated websites where video clips and things like that can be put on the website to be a supplement to a text-based case. And so I always say that I'm interested in new forms of cases that will challenge me to figure out how we should review that case. And so I welcome any submissions or ideas that might provide a new form for the case study. And then finally, we publish articles. And the articles that we publish are directly related to case research, case writing, or case teaching. We don't publish very many of these, but we want to be the source that people go to to find out about case research, writing, or teaching, and to provide best practice on some of those areas in the journal. So those are the kinds of things we publish. Again, we're looking to publish 40 articles or 40 cases in the next year, and you know, there'll be high quality cases, all with supporting instructor materials for faculty to choose. So let's move on to talk about our value proposition on the next slide. I'm very proud to be the editor of TCJ, and one of the things that I think sets us apart is the quality of the cases that we publish. All of our cases are double-blind peer-reviewed, and what most people find when they first submit to the journal, they're a little surprised to see the critical evaluation of the instructor's manual is given as much attention as the case itself. And so I think that's one of the things that truly sets us apart from other case outlets, is that we're providing developmental feedback on both the case and the instructor's manual, trying to make the total package that we publish as strong as we possibly can. And the developmental feedback, I think, is another thing that sets us apart. The Case Association sees itself as a developmental organization trying to take brand new case writers and to help them improve their work so that it can be published. And so what you'll find is that we have reviewers that write very thoughtful, constructive reviews that are designed to help the author publish the case and the instructor's manual. We're not the snarky reviewers that you might see at some other types of journals. So our acceptance rate at the Case Journal is a little higher than other high quality publications. We typically will stick with an author through a number of revision cycles, and so our acceptance rate hovers between 25 and 30%, which some people might say is a little bit high. I'm kind of proud of it because to me it emphasizes the developmental aspect of the journal. I've been talking about the importance of the instructor's manual, and I also think that this is one of the things that TCJ does better than anybody else. Our superior instructional support, again, the instructor's manuals are peer-reviewed, which is certainly not the case at a lot of other publications. Some don't even provide instructor's manuals. I think instructors should feel very comfortable choosing cases that have been published in TCJ because they have strong supporting materials that have had the same level of critical review as the case itself. And our instructor's manual guidelines emphasize case pedagogy and innovative teaching. I published an editorial letter called The Value Added Instructor's Manual, and the point I was trying to make in that is that you can increase your chances of getting your case accepted for publication by being generous with case teaching tips or providing innovative approaches to teaching your case. Our reviewers respond very well to that, and you're likely to get your case accepted for publication if you spend that kind of time on the instructor's manual. TCJ is ranked second to the Case Research Journal, so it's considered a highly ranked journal. We would like to see that, I'd like to see that flipped personally. I think that we're on the up. I think we've published a lot of cases. We're increasing the number of cases that we're publishing, and we're generating more recognition all the time. So I would hope that our ranking would improve as we continue to go forward. Lastly, then, we have a global distribution. So for case authors that are concerned about impact, this is pretty important because our cases have a reach around the world through the subscription model that Emerald provides. And that allows our materials to reach students in very far-flung places, which I think is really beneficial. And because we're getting, again, a lot of international submissions, we can improve the understanding of different parts of the world among all of our students. So we're not publishing just North American cases. We're publishing cases about companies in very many different places. And these will be beneficial for our North American students as well as for students in Africa or in the local area where the case was set, to have examples of strong companies doing great things. So I think if I can sum up this slide, we're a great journal. You should want to publish with us. I'm being facetious here, but I do think that we make a concerted effort to provide better support for authors and better support for instructors than many of the other case journals. And we will continue to work in that area to try to find ways to better support authors and instructors. Let's move on to the next slide. Now we're going to talk about the compact cases. I promised you this a little bit earlier. We started this initiative in 2015 because we realized that basically through our own teaching that students just weren't really getting as much out of cases as they used to. Mostly because they come to class unprepared, but they were finding a lot of the case materials that were out there to not be very interesting or engaging. And so we wanted to, in 2015, kind of change our model a little bit, or at least experiment with a new model. And so in this diagram, I have the old-fashioned trunk representing the traditional case. And traditional cases are 12 to 15 pages of text. If they're strategy cases, they could be considerably longer than that. They typically involve 5 to 6 learning objectives. A typical strategy case will have a full set of financial data. They'll have the income statement, they'll have the balance sheet, and all sorts of other graphs and exhibits. And I think students do see these traditional cases a lot like the old-fashioned trunk here in the picture. It's a little battered and a little worn, and I'm not going to open that trunk, is kind of the way they react to it. And so I get sometimes open resistance in class to a long case. Oh my God, do I have to really read that? And what happens is they don't read it, and then I stand in front and try to elicit any kind of conversation at all about the case. And if it's a company that they're familiar with, they rely on their own experiences. They'll talk about what they like about the company, what they don't like about the company, but they really aren't familiar with any of the case facts. And it's really difficult to get to the learning objectives or to accomplish them when students haven't read the case itself. So for all those reasons, we started the compact case idea in 2015. And as you can see, a compact case is much smaller and much sleeker. We are holding very strongly to 1,000 words or less for the length of the compact case. So that's about 2 to 3 pages of text at most, and a shorter set of exhibits than you would find in a compact, in a traditional case. So that 1,000 words or less, we're intending the case to be something that a student could read and digest in about 15 minutes. And that seems to resonate really well with the students. So 1 to 2 learning objectives, they're much more tightly focused than the traditional case. But really the only difference, all the case writing conventions that you would use for a traditional case hold for the compact case. The only difference is in the size of the case. Now, I will tell you that I think that there are some situations that lend themselves quite well to a compact case and others that don't. Compact case, because you only have 1,000 words, you have to be careful about what kind of topics you select to write about. Because you know, some industries are far too complex to really give enough background for students to address the issues in only 1,000 words. So you have to choose your companies and your industries carefully, and you have to also choose the learning objectives that you want to accomplish fairly carefully. You can't really accomplish everything with a short case. But let's turn to the next slide, and I'll show you an example. This example is a case I wrote, and it was about Chipotle and some issues they had with their pork supply. and it was written as a proof of concept. When we started the compact case idea, a lot of people thought we couldn't write an effective strategy case and have it only be 1,000 words. So the box on the left of the slide is basically the directions we provide to authors on our website about what a compact case is. And as you can see, our goal is to make the case accessible, readable, and more engaging for students. So I wrote this Chipotle case to prove a point. And the point was that you can write a strategy case, have it be short, have the exhibits be reduced, and it will generate as much discussion as a traditional strategy case. And so I have used this case with undergraduate students at 2 different universities, and I've also used it with MBA students, and I can tell you it works. It generates as much discussion, and actually I would say even more, because they actually read it. It's short, it's digestible, they read it and come to class prepared. They can reference it in the middle of discussion. They can find something that they want to talk about. And one of the things that I did when I wrote this is I also experimented with the financial data and used infographics to present some of the financial data so that it didn't look like the traditional boring tables of text. And what I found by my experiment was that students actually referenced some of the issues in the exhibits far more frequently than they did with a traditional case. And so I think we have room here to experiment with this new form and find that we can do a lot of the things that we would normally do with the traditional case in this shorter format, and that can be a much more powerful teaching tool than some of the longer traditional cases that we've been accustomed to. So the case itself is 2.5 pages in length. That would include the exhibits. And the teaching note is 13 pages long. Now, a lot of people find that interesting. This form, the compact case, is really seeming to work well with students. On the other hand, I also am hearing from instructors that are using compact cases in their classroom, and they feel that they're getting a great deal of student participation and discussion. Again, students being more familiar with the cases themselves, and so that the learning is as strong or better than our traditional cases. And so this is a form that I'm spending a lot of time this year on trying to generate interest in compact cases and get more submissions of compact cases for the journal. I will tell you that a lot of people first look at it and say, oh, 2.5 pages, I can write that in no time. It does take a lot of work because I think you probably have heard how difficult it is to make something short. To have enough information in the case for people to really address the issues and to have it within 1,000 words is a bit challenging. And so, I encourage you to give it a shot. We'll certainly work with you at TCJ to improve in your case if you choose to write one. But this has also been an educational piece for the peer reviewers, because they have to also understand that this is a compact case, and they can't ask the author to add all sorts of things to the case unless they're also going to tell the author what they can cut from the case, because we really don't want these to morph into something different. We have to keep to the 1,000 words. But I think it's a worthwhile model to look at, both from a teaching perspective and from a writing perspective. And so we're trying to, again, generate more submissions. And we're talking about doing a listing so that you can see more clearly what compact cases we do have and can give them a try. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about how people use compact. Oh, this I skipped ahead, but let me compare our compact cases to Harvard. Harvard is calling theirs brief cases, which we thought was somewhat brilliant. Wish that we had caught that idea before they did. But anyway, they're talking about their cases as being 5 to 8 narrative pages with 3 to 4 exhibits. They're doing a little bit of repositioning of some of their traditional cases. That is, they're taking longer cases and trying to cut them down to 5 to 8 pages and 3 to 4 exhibits, and they're publishing them in that way. I provided a list of the disciplines that they cover in their brief cases, and you'll notice that they don't have strategy cases there because they don't believe that you can generate strategy cases in less than 20 pages. But the other thing that and here's an example that would be somewhat comparable to my Chipotle case. It's 7 pages of text, 5 pages of exhibits, and the teaching note is 6 pages long with no teaching tips. The teaching note basically provides a quantitative analysis of an issue that's in the case, but that's about it. And the thing that I really want to point out about Harvard, everybody kind of looks at them as the gold standard for cases, but none of the Harvard cases are peer-reviewed, or at least not usually. And the teaching notes are generally not as supportive for instructors as many of the ones that we create. So I would encourage you to look at TCJ for the next time you're choosing cases for your classes, because I think you'll find that we do a really good job of writing strong cases, but also provide those kinds of supporting materials that instructors are looking for today. So let's talk about how people are using compact cases in the next slide. We are seeing people, based on some of the discussions I've had with other instructors that are using compact cases. Some of them are using them as homework assignments where the case is distributed to the students, and there perhaps some written questions are provided for them to read the case outside of class and answer the questions and then come to class for discussion. The traditional kind of case assignment that way. But then we're also seeing people using them more innovatively in class as an in-class assignment. So because the cases are short and you can read the case in 15 minutes, what's happening is that some instructors are actually distributing the case in class and having the students read them then and then generating the discussion. This can be pretty effective because obviously the students can't say I haven't read it because you sit there and watch them read it. The other piece there, I call it a back pocket, and some people are choosing compact cases and in a sense putting the case as a back pocket assignment. So what I mean by that is sometimes for whatever reason something may go wrong in the classroom, like technology just went wrong here or something like that, and so if they can't generate discussion or students seem bored, unprepared, they'll pull out a compact case and say, okay, instead of what we were planning to do, let's do this, and then they'll pass out the case and have a discussion. And that can be a way to salvage a class session that's going badly. So to energize the students again and get them more involved, let's do this case that I've been keeping in my back pocket all along that's relevant to this course, but now I'll give it out and we'll discuss it on the spot. And that seems to be working fairly well. I personally have used the Chipotle case that I used earlier as an example as an exam. And in this situation, I gave the students the case right in class. They were to read it, and then in small groups they did a presentation on their solution to the case and as their final exam for my course. And it was a really interesting exam because I didn't allow them to use PowerPoint to do their presentation. They just had kindergarten markers and some blank pieces of paper, and they had to draw their diagrams and so forth with those markers, and they did a great job. We didn't give them a very long time to do this kind of an exam, and so we didn't want them bogged down with the technology. So they could actually read the case, discuss what they thought the solution should be, develop some rudimentary drawings of diagrams and bullet points, and do a presentation in less than 2 hours. And so it worked fairly effectively, and they found it fun and engaging, and they did well on the exam because, again, they were interested and willing to participate. So I have one more slide, and then we can address any questions that you might have. So if you're interested in learning to write cases and don't have a lot of experience, the Case Association provides a certification program to teach new persons how to write cases. And it involves a series of online videos that you watch, and then you download a user guide that has some assignments that you complete, and then those assignments are given to a mentor who evaluates them and provides you with feedback. And you do this through a couple of cycles, and with the outcome being that you have a case that's near ready for publication, and you become certified as a level 1 case writer. And so I provide contact information for you if you're interested in that. And I think that we're also going to send you a brochure for that at the after this webinar is completed. So that's basically, case writing is wonderful. You should do it. It's great. Case teaching, you use cases from TCJ because we'll provide the instructor materials that you need to be effective. And I'm ready to take any questions or answer anything you may have.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. So we now have a few minutes for questions, which people can submit using the question box. So just to give those a couple of minutes to come in, I thought I'd just share some last information about TCJ and how to submit. So we welcome cases from practitioners and academics across all business disciplines. And you can see there the journal homepage link, which gives some useful background information. Also the online submission system, and here you can track the progress of your case through the review process. But if you've got any questions at all about how to submit a case to TCJ, do feel free to contact me at any point, and you've got my email address there. Then this last slide gives an overview of the key points to note when you're preparing your submission, and that's both for the case and the instructor's manual. I won't go through this now in a huge amount of detail because I think we're better spending the time with questions really. And after the webinar, we'll send around a link with a more detailed guide for submissions that Rebecca's created, which hopefully you'll find useful. So now we'll move on to some questions for Rebecca while we have her here. One that's come through is about theme issues planned for TCJ. If you've got any in progress at the moment that people can submit to, and also the process for suggesting ideas for theme issues, Rebecca.
We're doing a special issue right now on Blacks in business, and so this special issue has cases that have the main executive or decision maker in the case is an African American individual. And this is designed to provide, it's in response to, there was a professor at Harvard that talked about the Harvard freshman reads 300 cases, first year student reads 300 cases in the MBA program, but only 2 of those 300 cases had any people of color at all. And so we're trying to increase the diversity of examples that we have of effective managers and so forth. And so we're doing this Blacks in Business case. That issue, this first issue has closed, but we got such a good response to it that we're probably going to run a second special issue on Blacks in Business, and we'll be putting out a call for that. And then I'm also working on a special issue for the new case forms that we talked about in the presentation today, and we'll be publishing examples of comic book cases and raw cases and so forth, so that you could see what this might be like. You could use those in your teaching and see how it affects your teaching. And then we would hope that we would get increased submissions in those particular forms, or perhaps you'll see them and be inspired to create a whole new form. Those are the special issues we're working on right now. We're always open to new ideas. If you have a particular focus that you think might lend itself well to a special issue, you can just email me and we can discuss it and see if we can figure out a way to make it happen.
Great, thank you. Next question we've had is, would you be interested in cases written both as a full case and a compact case, or would you prefer just to see one or the other?
I personally believe it's really hard to take a traditional case and shrink it down to a compact case, but I could see an author doing both, and I wouldn't have any opposition. Of course, they'd have to be separately reviewed, and we'd have to figure out some way to coordinate that so that we weren't having, one set of feedback going and saying, well, change it, make it a spring case instead of a winter case or something like that. And then have the opposite come for the compact case. But no, I would be open to receiving a case that has both a long form and a short form.
That's great, thank you. And the last question we have through at the moment, how do you join TCJ as a reviewer?
To join TCJ as a reviewer, thank you. All you need to do is send me an email, and I would be happy to set you up. I think that reviewing is one of the ways that new case writers can learn a lot about writing cases by seeing examples of other people's work. We have a pretty strong editorial board that provide some of the most beautiful reviews you've ever seen, and I think you could learn a lot by reading those reviews as well as reviewing the cases yourself. So if you'd like to review for the journal, basically send me an email or send one to Claire and she'll forward it on to me. And it would be helpful if you would indicate your areas of interest or expertise. If you have particular industries, perhaps, that you know a lot about that you would be a good reviewer for, or in terms of courses or subject areas that you are strong in, that so that we can match them up. But I'm always looking for great reviewers, so that would be wonderful.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much, Rebecca and Claire, for sharing all of that with us. That's about all we've got time for. I know there's a few more questions that have come through. We've had requests about the presentation, and so we'll be following up early next week with an email to all of you with the recording and also all of the documents that were mentioned throughout about the Case Association and the ways in which you can publish. So I've left up some contact details on the screen now if you do wish to contact us about anything else. You're also free to follow us on social media and see what we're up to with cases. But thank you very much for spending your time with us this afternoon, and I look forward to spending some more time with you with webinars in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.